Okay, Scott, would you like to share your screen?
Absolutely.
Able to share your screen. So for those of you in the Zoom, oh, there's Jorge and Julie. Bob and I are here. So let me do this. Let me view. Okay, there you go. Okay, perfect. I like that, Scott. So for those of you on Zoom, we have Scott Koval with Partner IT. And I just heard his boss say he's the man. So he's going to talk to us about implementing advanced chat features.
So I'm already off to a great start. That's fantastic.
Absolutely. No pressure, buddy.
Yeah. It's all downhill from here.
Right. Okay, Scott, you're on.
All right, thanks. So yeah, as mentioned, I'm Scott Koval from Partner IT. And my boss thinks I'm outstanding. So remember that by the time this session is over, please. And we're just here to talk about some implementing some advanced tips. So chatbot tips. So we'll get this underway and artificial intelligence blowing up. Duck. When you're watching this later, if you do watch this later, I was supposed to add sound effects there, but I didn't. So just make them with your mouth or something, and it'll be just as good. We're here to implement advanced chat features, and we'll be going over a few things. So just a little bit of an agenda here. Right. So we'll be covering training and enhancing the chat through the logs, and primarily the Watson logs. Right. We're going to be taking a big look at Watson here. And the continuing training and enhancement that needs to be done for chatbot. A lot of people treat the chatbot like it's a Ron Popeil device where you just set it and forget it. And that's not really the case. It does need some babysitting, especially initially after a launch. And then we'll dive into, and this should be the big draw, to create the custom dialogues to handle frequently asked questions, right? So we'll get into a little bit about how to create custom dialogues inside of Watson, again, Watson. And finally, using the irrelevant conversations, which as it turns out, does not have to be irrelevant at all. So we'll be taking a look at those topics as we get through. A couple of things about this presentation. I'll be focusing on the IBM Watson and the IBM interface. Since it's advanced chat topics, I'm assuming you know how to publish a service request and how to point this thing to DWP to return search results. In fact, it's quite easy, and BMC does a really good job at making us look good. Not good enough where anyone's going to mistake chatbot to turn into Skynet and onslaught humanity with a wave of Terminators, but it's good. It's really good. It makes us look good. So we're going to go a step deeper than that, a step deeper than the Helix interface. And as we go along, we will recognize some of those AI parts of Watson and point out how it does help us along the way, and where the AI kind of kicks in and gives us a helping hand that maybe we don't otherwise deserve, but it really differentiates it from a script bot. So getting into that first topic, the training and enhancing chat through logs. The training and enhancement, this is almost an ongoing activity. When you do launch a chatbot, it seems that the development cycle for chatbot is you create it in a vacuum, you talk to other IT people like us, everybody's got a propeller hat on, and we all talk to it the same way. And we've got some parlance that we use, some vernacular that's inherent to us, and we launch a POC with it, and then we launch it to the general audience. And of course, things can go horribly awry because normal people don't talk like us. In fact, most often they don't even smell like us. So we have to keep that in mind. You have to continuously train this chatbot, and especially that key area, that first 2 to 4 weeks after a launch to the general audience, is when you'll constantly be in here training and enhancing this chatbot. So again, looking through Watson is really, as far as I can tell, the only way to really do this properly. If you go into Watson, and I'm sure everybody here has. So this side menu should be awfully familiar. And we're just going to start off with the training session, which is the user conversations. And clicking the user conversations, I get this kind of screen here. And I know that's a little small. This doesn't mean to be an eye chart. We'll be zooming in on this in a second. But what this does is it lists every phrase that a user has pitched a chatbot. And these phrases, to use the technical parlance, is called an utterance. Out of all the words to describe phrasing in sentences, IBM has chosen the word utterance. Could have did better. And then once we take a look at these conversations, we're looking to train the chatbot. What we're really looking at is where maybe chatbot's misunderstanding us, where it's not cluing into what we're laying down. So we'd like to open the conversation, and that's where we can actually get into some of the specifics, where we can see the user that's talking. Right now, this is very not user specific because we're really focused on the conversation, not the user. But we can get into the actual drill right down into the conversation and put maybe some context to what they're saying. So when you train the chatbot, and you can train it from the user conversations log, as we've been saying, this is a list of all the user utterances, and we can click the edit button. Well, I've got it highlighted in yellow. This won't be yellow on your screen. This is a special effect done in PowerPoint to show the edit button. And so you click the edit button, and this will allow you, this is where you actually start training the chatbot. So if I take a look at these utterances, chatbot's doing a pretty good job in this case of keeping up with the user conversation. So somebody typed in live agent, cool, it knows we're talking about live agent chat. Somebody asked for status of my tickets. Hey, we got a request for status. Somebody said hi. Hey, that's pleasant. So not only do we have a greeting, but it actually recognized that greeting is specifically around a hello salutation. We get to Dell latitude E7240, and chatbot has no idea what we're talking about, and it'll be marked as irrelevant. And we'll be later on in this discussion, we'll be talking quite a bit about irrelevance and why they're quite handy actually. But clicking the little edit button, so maybe we want to train the chatbot that Dell latitude it's good, right? This isn't something that's just out of left field. It's something that we want chatbot to recognize in the future. Maybe it's related to a laptop request, or maybe some kind of maybe an incident with the laptop. So we want chatbot to be a little bit smarter here. Clicking the edit button brings up this screen. And there's a few things that we can do here. We can just ignore it, which that's valid, right? Not every utterance is a good one. But we can also pick and choose how we want chatbot to kind of respond to this utterance. And here it's just picking some of the high hitters, right? So search is a very high hit. So maybe we just want to add that to the search criteria. So whenever somebody types in E, Dell E, whatever that was, we're just going to search for it. Maybe the weather, which that's a bad choice. If we come down low enough, we can actually click the drop down and see all the conversation topics, which we'll see is called intents. And we can tell the chatbot that whenever somebody mentions the Dell E, whatever it was, we can pick one of these conversation topics. And in that list, you'll see that the conversation topics are the service requests that you've published to the chatbot. So any service requests that you've published will show up in that list. And that's the easiest way I can think to train the chatbot. Just tell it what you're talking about. And that's, I think, the first hint of the AI that we see kicking in, where I based on some topic, I can tell it some utterance. I can tell it that here's what the user meant. So going forward, whenever you see that utterance, specifically go to that intent and respond accordingly. Maybe make the person a ticket, maybe just return some knowledge, but whatever, we're telling the chatbot how to respond. Now, as we go through some of these utterances that you see along the way, they aren't going to make a lot of sense. And again, especially as from the contracting world, a lot of things don't make sense when we get onto the client site because they have their own vernacular. They're just speaking their own tacit language, like a tribal knowledge that I don't get it. And in that case, maybe you need some context around around that utterance. So clicking on the open conversation allows you to actually see that entire conversation from the time that the user opened the conversation, they initiated the chatbot, to the time they close the window, and you'll be able to see everything that not only the chatbot responded with, but all of the things that were asked of the chatbot by the user. So in this case, I'm seeing this is the welcome message here, and the user is asking for the status of tickets, and then the next little bit there is the JSON being returned with the status of tickets. So when we do find some of these utterances that don't make sense, we can drill in even a little further, read the entire conversation. Some are fun, and get some kind of context around that. And that helps us train the chatbot even better, right? So now we maybe the person was just looking for information instead of a service request, or maybe we need to enrich this with some knowledge. So flipping over into custom dialogues, once we're training the chatbot, we may find things come up in the conversation that we just aren't handling very well. And we'd like to be able to handle them, of course, because that's customer satisfaction, and that's good, pays the bills. And when the user initiates the chat, oftentimes they're just looking for like little quick wins, right? So they want some quick information, and the information usually provided, like especially out of the box with Chatbot, is in the terms of a knowledge article, or maybe one of your service requests. But chances are it's a knowledge article, and that's how we disseminate knowledge to the end user. But, you know, as we can see from this picture here, something like what is the service desk phone number? If the user asks that and you give them the 5 tiles of knowledge articles, and they have to go in and read the knowledge article, and maybe it doesn't really give them what they want in the first place, you know, that happens. It takes them out of the experience, right? It takes them out of that conversational flow. It's not really a great user experience. So we'd like to just be able to answer the user directly, and just make it a little bit more conversational, a little bit more friendly, and a little bit more helpful. And custom dialogues offer a way to do that in a way that you just can't do with Helix, right? So there's no such thing as just a little quick win in Helix. It's either you're throwing out a KA or a service request. So when we're talking about custom dialogues, we can think of this as talking to an actual person, right? How we would engage in conversation. And there's a couple key things that we can key in on. Now, creating a custom dialogue is very much like we talk to people. They talk to us, and I guess it's better to think of them as a weird person, right? Maybe you're at a party and you get stuck by that weird person that just wants to talk your ear off. Or I'll give you an example. It was just the other day, and I'm bringing groceries in, and my neighbor decides to have a conversation with me, and she's talking about shopping. I could care less about shopping, but I quickly picked up that she's talking to me about shopping as I'm thinking about ways to get out of the conversation. So her first intent to me is shopping. And when I hear that intent, I have to think, okay, how do I respond to this? Besides, oh, I got to go. right? If I do need to give a response, I've got to think about some kind of proper response to shopping. That's what really a conversation can be, right? Look for what the user wants, look for the intention of the user, and respond. Now, optionally, and this conversation lends well, the neighbor started talking about things that I further didn't care about, such as she went shopping for toys for her grandson, and then she went to the wine store, and then she went to the clothing store, and she said a bunch of other things that I didn't listen to. However, the point was she was actually narrowing down her intent, right? So the intention was still shopping, but she was telling me specifically what she was shopping for: toys and clothes and wine, to give you an insight on my neighbor's life. And that's when we start breaking down and getting specific about the intention. That is an optional feature inside of Watson called entities, right? We can actually take the intention and get a little bit more granular with it and actually tailor responses. So not only are we answering the intention, but we're answering the specific entities. So building those custom dialogues, we're going to build one, kind of, right? We're going to demo building one here. So basically it's that user phone number, but we'd like to expand a little bit. I'd like to show not only the intent, but also the entities and the responses for the entities. So our custom dialogue will be recognizing when the user wants to call someone, right? So maybe they want to call someone, or they want to phone someone. They're going to ask for the number, right? We've got to keep all these different, hair. We got to keep all these little different things in mind as we're building up this conversation. And we want to get a little bit more granular on it. So let's build out an entity so that when the user says, well, I just want to call someone, usually you don't get that, oh, I just want to call someone. Like, people generally aren't that lonely. So they're going to call someone specific. They want to call maybe the service desk or facilities, right? We're going to touch on facilities, HR. Well, that would have been a good one. I didn't think of that. That's not part of our example, but HR would be a great one. All right. So these are different entities that we can use to help us identify what who the user wants to call. And then finally, we're going to build out 4 simple dialogues that responds to each of the entities that the user wants to dial for. So if they do want to dial the service desk, we're going to give them the service desk number. If they want to dial facilities, we're going to give them the facilities number. If they want to call human resources, they're out of luck for this example. I didn't do it. So we'll start with the intent. And that's the first thing that we really do have to build in the chatbot. And when you think about from a conversational standpoint, this is really where the conversation starts. We have to identify what the user wants. So in this case, the intent is it's really the topic of conversation, as I've typed there. Intents are denoted with the hashtag, and that's chatbot parlance for this is an intent. So it's a special character. You can't have an intent without one. As you can see here, I'm just calling it support numbers. And no surprise, the chatbot is a little bit of a synonym machine, where we're going to tell it different ways that users can ask for a support number, right? So they might say the word call. They might say, how do I call? I'm trapping it. They might just say, give me the number for, or the phone number for. I guess if we were in the UK, we could say, I'd like to ring up, right? That seems to be a thing when I watch British shows. They ring people up. So we could include that. And that's the intent. So this is the basis of where everything starts and finishes. It's really focusing in on that intent. So although that last example only had 4 examples, you really want to flesh that out with as many synonyms as you want. You really want to capture any way that the user can ask for something. Now the entities, we're getting a little bit more granular, have the ampersand or the @ sign. And again, keyword for chatbot, understands what an entity is with the chat sign or the @ sign. And I took this from the net. Now most of this presentation I wrote myself, but I hit the Staples easy button on this one, and I copied and pasted. Entities are used for identifying interesting parts of the user's sentences, such as names and dates. Sure, that's pretty nebulous. When you're, I have found, if you're coming from a remedy background, a good way to think of a remedy is when you're building the radial buttons, right? So the radial buttons is usually, it's one field and then you've got different options for those fields. That's a great way to think of an entity. It's each one of those option buttons. If you're coming from a language background such as Java or C++, you may want to think of them as enumerations or enums. So in this case, we're building out an entity that has, we can see at the bottom here, I'm defining 4 different things: facilities, field services, security desk, and service desk. And then for each one of those, I'm defining, again, more synonyms. How many ways can they ask for this? Well, the service desk may be referred to as a service desk or a help desk or the help space desk or the support desk. And I could have came up with more and should have. I think in a real world situation, you would. The security desk, I just called it security, but you could also call it security desk. It does take both into account. If somebody types in service desk, and it'll recognize that along with the synonyms. Field services, I've just got labeled as field techs, field tech, desk side support. Facilities, I was at a loss. I couldn't think of anything, so that's blank. But again, think hard. You want as many synonyms as possible. I suppose if we did want human resources in here, I could have added that, and it would be a human resources type, and maybe the synonyms would be like human resources and HR or the termination factory, whatever happens in your environment, however people are going to ask for that. So once I've got my intents and my entities in place, I can actually finally start to respond to the user. I've got enough information coming in from the end user. This is all about the end user at this point. So I've got enough of that information. I can start to build dialogues. I can actually start to respond to this person. So the dialogue is actually when we get to speak as the chatbot. And we listen to the people, and then we've heard what they've had to say. And we can build up these responses. And I know this is a bit of an eye chart, so I've zoomed in on the next slide. Right, so here are our 4 different dialogue responses, one for each of the entity types. I'm just going to move that window there. So if for the case of the security number, I'm taking a look and we're zeroing right in on that intent, our support number's intent. So as soon as I recognize the word call or number or phone number, any of those, and I also recognize something else, right? So for the support desk number, any one of the service desk or the service desk synonyms that we defined earlier. If I'm doing field services, it's any of the field services. In this case, we're doing security desk, so they could type in security desk or security. I suppose I could have fleshed that out a little bit more. And again, I encourage you to just add as many synonyms as possible. It just makes the chatbot work better. And at the bottom, the assistant response. So this is what actually gets returned to the user. Now, as it showed on the last slide with the little light bulb, this is a great way to kind of spruce up your responses. You can include HTML in your responses, and this will work in Slack. This works in Teams if you're doing the Teams integration or a Slack integration. It works on the native client. Not so great with SMS. It'll just ignore any of the HTML, but they still get the data, so it does fail gracefully. And in this case, our response is very simply, it's just a little table that we're doing here. And I'm dropping in a graphic of a phone that we saw earlier, and we'll see it again. And this is a live link on a server. So I've graded out kind of like, that guy in the background on like Cops when they arrest him, but he didn't sign the non-disclosure, is the disclosure agreement, so that they got to blank out his face. So that's what that is. But this would just be an URL to an image. And we're just telling the user your security desk number is, and we're bolding the information. So we're drawing a little bit of attention to it. Once again, getting a little fancier with that response. We're bolding the number, easier to read, and then we're closing off our table. And that's a very simple way to kind of rope everything together, where we're identifying the intent. We're addressing maybe any specifics that they want to, that they're inquiring about, and we're responding accordingly. And that's really all there is to a custom dialogue. They're very simple. Nothing in this advanced chatbot is tough, but useful. So the fruits of our labor, we get to actually see this in the chatbot return. So now I ask for, and this is where we start to see a little bit of that AI popping up. Once again, not Skynet AI, nice AI. We're asking for the security number. What is the number for security? And it knows your security desk number is this number here. Get them, go get them. And then how do I call facilities? And the number is 5555555. And the reason they don't have a fancy number is I couldn't think of anything funny or relevant for facilities. They really give you nothing to work with. And we're asking for what is the help desk phone number. And we've got this help desk phone number, the 5 help, which I think is very common. I've got more than one client with 5 help as their help desk number. And can I call for field tech? And we're taking a look, and yeah, we get the right responses. And in each case, if we kind of dissect the utterance, and I hate that word. If we dissect the utterance, what is the number for security? So number is our intent, and we've got security as our entity, right? And we're keying in on that and returning the right result. How do I call facilities? Once again, we've got intent, and facilities is our entity. What is the help desk phone number? So again, now we're flipping them around, and the chatbot's intelligent enough to pick up on this. We're giving the entity first, and then the intent. And can I call for a field tech? Yeah. So again, different wording, and we're not very concerned about the wording at all. We didn't program any of this. We just gave it a bunch of synonyms to look for, and it does the parsing for us. So the takeaway is the chatbot doesn't really care about the sentence structure. And I think we've all done some very sloppy Google searches where I do this all the time. You slap in some words. They don't even make sense half the time. And it's a Hail Mary, and you're hoping you find what you need. And the chatbot works much the same way. It doesn't care about the wording. It's going to try and satisfy, and it does that keyword search. And the secret sauce is the intents and your entities. So here's another example of a custom dialogue, and I just wanted to touch on this because we took a look at kind of almost a worst case scenario where we have an intent, we have a bunch of entities, and then we're responding to both, right? Both have to be met, and you give a response, a dialogue response. But they can be very simple, and they often are very simple, where it's just an intent and your list of responses. So in this case here, we have our magic 8-ball, and that's our intent. So it's a magic 8-ball. You shake it, and you look at it, and it tells your future. They're magical. You can pick them up for under 20 bucks. I don't know why everybody doesn't have this. This is how I make all my life decisions. So I built one in Chatbot, and you can ask magic 8-ball. You can say magic -8-ball, right? So again, we're thinking of synonyms that the users may use. Any way that we can to ask for it. Here's magic 8-ball. Somebody twinkle fingers actually typed out the number 8. So we're accounting for that. And if we see any of this along the way, then I've got again, we've got the grayed out images because there's a little image of a 8-ball that shows up. It's cute. The responses are, when you shake it and then the triangle comes out, look not so good, or yes, or no, get a life, whatever it says back. I've trapped those, and each of these are here. Now, the difference with this custom dialogue, and I guess to make this work, is when you do give a bunch of responses, and you're thinking, well, what good is that when you're first looking at it? And by default, the Watson will give them back to you sequentially. And we see this with one of the dialogues in Helix, where if it doesn't know what you're talking about, at first it says sorry, and then some kind of sorry text, and then it comes back and says, well, I'm really sorry. And then the third time, kind of like Zuckerberg, who keeps apologizing for selling our data out, the apologies ramp up, but they're always in sequential order, right? So what we're looking to do here is, I don't want sequential order because I can just, keep asking the 8-ball until I get what I want. The secret sauce is right with that yellow bar there. I've highlighted it. It's to set it to random. So that way it'll pick just a random response out of the umpteen given that we've got there. What is that, 8? So it'll pick a random response out of the 8, and that's what the user receives. And I know what you're thinking. Scott, this is totally useless. How am I ever going to use this in a real world situation? And I find you to be a little critical, but here's how you can actually use it. If we look up here, there's a tips and tricks, and I've used this at a few companies so far, and it's well received. Especially when you're launching the Chatbot, you can give tips and tricks. So instead of magic 8-ball, maybe it's just hashtag tips, and you're looking for maybe how does the Chatbot work? You're looking at your user examples is give me a tip, give me a trick, give me something give me some inside scoop. And our responses will just be random tips, and we try and shoot for 20, and we try and make them company specific, right? You're using some of that tacit knowledge and maybe promoting some of the new functionality that you're launching in that Chatbot. But that way, if anybody asks for a tip, you're just randomly giving them back a nice little tip and trick. And again, a quick win, easy to do. The hardest part about it is finding 20 things to tell them about. Other than that, the dialogue itself, quite straightforward. So that's custom dialogues. You need an intent, an optional entity to figure out, maybe fine tune what they're asking for, and then do the response. And responses are, that's kind of the fun part. And this is really the fun part of the whole gig. Everything else is like process and procedure. So next, we'll take a look at how to handle those irrelevance. I think everybody's seen these, and just the very name implies that they're not important or they're meaningless. Oh, by the way, this video brought to you by Dasani. Thanks. When you want water that's not good enough for Coca-Cola, Dasani. So if we take a look, irrelevance. This is the screen that we looked at before, where we're looking at all the user utterances. We're back in user conversations. And we've got, I'm looking at, in this case for this example, to kind of stump the Chatbot so that I had an example. So as we can see here's me asking, can I call for a field tech? Well, we saw that earlier, building out our example. And so I thought I'd stump it. I'd say, how do I throw a baseball? And it did a search. It was kind of cool. It didn't tell me how to throw a baseball, by the way, but it tried like heck to tell me how to throw a baseball. So I thought, well, I'll up the ante a little bit. I'll ask it, what is the meaning of life? And again, it did a search for me. I thought, well, that's pretty good. Now, the number one hit was, I think, Proxima servers or something like that. It really didn't answer my question. But I did sleep better that night knowing that the meaning of life is Proxima server. So maybe it did. But I finally stumped it with, is morality an absolute or a cultural construct? And at that point, because it's AI and it doesn't really have a soul, didn't know what I was talking about. So that's finally irrelevant. So we had an irrelevant conversation. And I have found either people misunderstand what irrelevant conversations are, or they don't know how to leverage them and use them. So really the irrelevant conversation doesn't mean that the utterance is irrelevant. It just means the chatbot doesn't know what you're talking about. And we saw that earlier with a little bit of training, but we're going to take a little bit closer look at irrelevance. So I could have said spoiler alert because I just talked through this whole slide, but to reiterate, basically an irrelevant is any time that you utter something to the chatbot, it searches the intents, it searches the entities, and it's clueless. It doesn't know what to do. So it falls to the bottom of the bucket. And a lot of these utterances so it's irrelevant to the chatbot. It could be a wealth of information to us because users can ask for things that the chatbot doesn't know about, but we'd like to respond. Maybe it's useful, right? So the utterances themselves often express the needs of the user community, and we just haven't met it, right? So they search for something relevant, and we don't have a knowledge article for them. We don't have a public service request. So we can actually kind of leverage these irrelevance quite nicely. So I built this little tree, and it's very little. It's a root and 4 branches on what we can do with irrelevance. Now, my favorite, because it's the easiest, is to ignore them. And they don't necessarily go away, but you can ignore them. It's an option. It might be truly irrelevant, right? Somebody asking for what's the score in the Mets game. Well, these are usually enterprise tools. It's not Google. They're not supposed to be looking up ESPN stats here. So we can ignore those. In some cases, we can train the chatbot. So we saw that earlier with the Dell instance where somebody's asking for what I'm assuming is company equipment with that Dell. And the chatbot didn't know what to do, but we could certainly train it to go somewhere, search some knowledge, or return something useful to the user. We can create some knowledge. And this is where we start to get into some decision-making process, and we're going to leverage a little bit about what we talked about in the enhancement and training, where we take a look in context, what the user is asking for, what that utterance is, and we can satisfy that. We can, if a bunch of users are excuse me, getting tripped up over the words, because this excites me. What we can do is take a look at a lot of the user utterances. And if these utterances are being repeated across a lot of users, there's probably some relevance to that irrelevancy, right? We need to do something. It's almost like it's a call to action. So if I take a look at the irrelevance, now we've already looked at this, we can train the irrelevant, right? And yeah, so we can go to that screen, you click the pencil and tell it exactly what you mean, right? So we can train the irrelevant. Remember, ignore is still an option. If we do see multiple users asking the same thing, then we should bring that up, right? There should be some kind of report that you're bringing to whatever power that be, whatever hat, positional hat somebody wears that makes the decision on whether to launch new stuff into your Helix offering, and let them know, okay, there's a bunch of people asking for this. What's a good way to handle it? Should we ignore it? Should we train the chatbot to do something? Where do we want to route that? And oftentimes I have found that it's a great way to identify what knowledge articles need to be created. This is something that users are asking for, and we don't have a good answer. So a knowledge article, easy win, right? And sometimes that turns into a service request. So if a lot of users are asking for assistance on something, that fulfillment record on the back end could be a work order, maybe it's an incident, and that's a great way to identify a new service request opportunity, maybe a little bit of both. So irrelevance, absolutely not irrelevant. Now, the chatbot handles irrelevance nicely, right? So as we're talking, and maybe this crept up in the back of your mind, it certainly didn't mine, I had to look it up. how does the chatbot handle irrelevance? And why doesn't the whole thing just crash? If we don't tell it what to do, why doesn't it just like freeze? So when you look at a skills file, and again, I'm focused right on Watson. I'm not even thinking Helix at this point. No matter what you do in Watson, and to be honest, all these rules are really applicable to Azure, the chatbot, Microsoft's chatbot, and AWS follows a lot of the same rules. There's two nodes at a minimum that a skills file needs, and that's the conversation start and the anything else. So the conversation start node, and you'll find out right up at the top. And if there's no hashtag, there's no @ sign, there's nothing, it's just conversation start. You only get one, so use it wisely. And it lets you set the verbiage of the greeting. So it's, you know, hi, welcome to this chatbot. Usually it's a greeting. In Helix, though, you set that verbiage with Innovation Studio. So that's part of that initial screen where you get to set the welcome message. And Innovation Studio injects that message into the chatbot dialogue. And that's how the conversations start happening. So that's handled for you. And so that gets triggered. Yeah, so not a lot of thought needs to be put into that one. Well, a little bit, but you get to do it through well-known tools in Helix, not Watson. In the middle, you'll have all your other dialogue nodes. These are all the things that you're talking about, your service requests, your live agent redirects, all those other goodies sit in the middle. And then at the very bottom is your anything else. And if you're looking through your skills file and you're using the out-of-the-box skills file from BMC, the dialogue title is BMC do not understand. And you'll see that, and it's labeled as anything else. Again, no hashtag or ampersand. And it's the dialogue that handles anything that the chatbot couldn't match. And that's where you get to, I think I mentioned it earlier about how it just progressively keeps saying, I'm sorry, or I'm super sorry. That's where you're going to find that. That's how out of the box it handles the anything else. So anything else is a great place to override what BMC gives us. So there's nothing wrong with saying sorry, but by the third time it wears a little thin, right? And this is where you start seeing things like get me a real person, maybe profanity, right? Live agent, get me to a live agent, because nobody wants that. So I've often taken the opportunity to override the assistant, what the assistant responds with, instead of just apologizing. You still apologize because you kind of mess it up from the user's point of view. But you're defining the scope, right? And redefining the scope and letting the user know exactly what the capabilities of your chatbot are is a great way to get the user on the right track instead of just having them beat their head against the wall, and which is frustrating. I've done it. I think we all have. We all know what it's like. This is a great way to kind of level set that. If your chatbot only has 3 services published and it has a wide variety of knowledge articles, tell the user that. And also tell them flat out, I'm not Google. I don't know everything. I just know what's in the enterprise and I only know what's in the knowledge article. That's my purpose. And it really helps keep down that frustration during the dialogue. And really that's what it's all about. I don't think too many people are under the impression that your chatbot's going to pass the Turing test. No one's going to think they're talking to a real person on the other end. So at least take the anger out of it, because a lot of people don't like talking to bots. I talk to my friends and hey, what do you think about chatbot? Chatbots are pretty cool, right? And no, I hate those things. I was on some website and I had a terrible experience. I just wanted to punch the bot in the face. Thinking, wow, such violence. So I just tell people I'm a janitor. I personally really enjoy this though. And I listen to these points of frustration, and the points of frustration often come from the fact that whomever has programmed that chatbot really wants the end user to think they're a human that they're talking to. You're not going to fool anybody. We're smarter than that. So it's best just to be honest, right? I don't know everything. I'm just a bot. Do that level set, and a great place to do that level set is right at the bottom here in the anything else node. And that's all I've got. And we've got a few minutes left for Q&A. There's nothing exciting over there. That's just a clock. And I could have looked at the clock here, but I'm not that smart. So if there's any Q&A, I'd be happy to entertain a few questions.
Any questions, Bob?
I have a question for you, Scott.
Yes.
So do you take this show on the road, do stand-up and comedy clubs? 'Cause you're pretty good.
Oh, well, you know, I appreciate that, because as I'm talking, I'm just getting a lot of silence, which is awfully like when I'm actually in front of real people. So I'm used to that. But yeah, I'm glad you enjoyed.
Well, I'm not usually quiet, but Phil put the microphone on mute, so that's why you got all the silence.
Oh, all right. Yes, you know, some audience feedback would have been nice, because yeah, I was just thinking I was up here dying. I actually resorted to my Dasani joke.
I didn't miss it. I
Crazy.
didn't get it.
There actually was some laughter here when you were talking about some of your comments, and we're like, oh yeah,
Do you recommend for service request management to send them to there's a workplace, or to have them fill out in the chat bot and kind of resolve all questions in there? Or can you even do that?
I'm sorry, I missed some of that.
Yeah, I'm sorry. There's a microphone on the front of the room here, so he's gonna come up here and repeat the question.
Can you hear me, Scott?
Yes, yes, I can.
So I was wondering if for the chat bot, can it fill out like a digital workplace form?
Yes, that's exactly what it's for. So the reason I didn't include it in advanced is if you ever, I'm assuming you haven't tried it or looked at it, you'll be surprised at how easy it is when you try it. So when you're in DWPA and you've got your form filled out, there's you can publish it from there, or you can do it through Innovation Studio when you're in your chatbots. And you can just publish a service, and you pick your service from your list of services in DWPA. And it walks you through it's like a 5-step wizard, but really only 2 steps kind of count, right? So you do a next, and then you get to the questions part. And when the questions, you can kind of fiddle around, and you know, some things in a form don't really translate well when you're having a conversation, even if it's a faked one. So you reword those in a conversational manner. And how loose that is something that you really want to determine up front. Some businesses like a chatbot to sound like a chatbot.
Mm-hmm.
They just prefer that. Other people want this loosey conversational, let's have fun type of thing. So you want to set that, I hesitate to say, well, it's a personality. You want to set that personality up front, and that will guide you into taking the form questions and translating them into questions that read well through a chat. So some of my advice there, or some of the things that I've learned through some SCAR material, get burned a couple of times. Your first question, tell them how many questions are coming. Because other than that, it just seems like an endless array of questions, like, oh, good, it's an interrogation. What a lovely experience I'm having. So tell them up front, and I use the first name, and there's those chatbot variables. You'll find those easy enough. You drop in the first name, you say, I have 5 questions. I have, X amount of questions, however many in the form. And then go through and word those nicely. And then when they get to the last question, or the second last question, you can say, or last question, final question. Thanks for sticking in there with me. What's your business justification, or, whatever that last question is, and keep it nice like that. But if you tell the user up front, when you're working out those questions, tell them how many questions you're going to be going through, so it doesn't feel so interrogation-y, and then let them know when they're finished. And that really seems to just make a huge difference. So, yeah, I think I over-explained that one because I talk too much. So thanks for sticking with me.
Julie says, excellent question. He's wondering that as well, also on Zoom.
Oh, Let me see here. Okay. Oh, very good. Yes. Yeah, I'm looking at the chat now and yes, that's exactly what she said.
Great. Any other questions? Robert, you say anything?
And how do you determine which service requests you put into the chatbot? Or do you recommend that all services be in the chatbot?
No. So the quickest way to failure, and by the way, I know this isn't a CMDB thing, but it's the same rule for CMDB. Do not chuck everything in to the chatbot. Don't chuck everything into your CMDB. Have use cases set out for what you publish to the chatbot. What seems to be a good recipe for success is to launch incrementally. And hey, is this Robert Bowen? Like, am I talking to my boss? I need to start saying, sir. What you want to do is identify the top request. So if the customer wants, 5 services published or 10 services published, take a look at the service requests, what users are actually asking. And that's your cutoff point, right? Like take the top 5. And then give it a sniff test. You have to give it that sniff test, right? So if the top 5 and then number 2 on the list has like 30 questions, don't even think about chatbotting that. Just there's a nice way around that. There's an elegant way around that, but I'll stick to the question for a second. So take those high hitters and chatbot those, and then make sure that the questions are short, and that's a good recipe for success. The other way around it, if you find that your request is too verbose, what's worked well is you write a knowledge article for that request with a link to the DWP form. So the user, that they're going to chat. I'm going to pretend I'm on my phone. And how do I do this? And then they get back to knowledge article. They click on the knowledge article, and they read the knowledge article. This is to submit a request, or submit a new hire, right? That's usually got a lot of questions. Here's the link, and they can click that link. It'll whip them over into DWP, and they're back into the form mode. But at least you're still helping the user, and you're not going to frustrate them with a million questions coming through chatbot, because the users do not like a ton of questions through chatbot. They don't like it. It starts to feel too like they're trapped.
I like that, Scott. This is Phil. That's a great idea. I think enabling people to, as you say, put a link in there rather than because I've whether it's a cable company or phone company or whatever, and I get these, how may I help you? Blah blah blah, and I'm like, if they had given me a link that I could click, I would think that was fantastic. That's a great suggestion. Any other questions? Scott, that's a fantastic presentation. Thank you so much. Thank you, Partner IT, for A, sponsoring, and B, presenting. You guys are a key part of this. So we really appreciate your participation. Thank you for the presentation. Let us know when you play Vegas, and we'll come and buy tickets.
Well, thank you very much. All right, everyone, take care. Thanks for coming out. Thanks for listening to me.
Thanks, Scott. Good job.
Good job.